Get comfortable in your chairs. Center yourselves. Right? Allow yourselves to be present. Close your eyes if you're willing to do it. Put your feet on the floor, flat. Take a deep, deep breath. And just allow the peace of the room to enter you, to almost overwhelm you. So tonight we're going to talk about interesting things, maybe difficult things. So I want us to open our hearts to each other. So take a moment to kind of stretch your heart just a little bit, this way and this way. And a blessing on this community for acceptance and for sharing. Ay, 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 ay. 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 Ay, 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 again. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. I think we're having tryouts for choir next week, is it? So some of you should definitely apply, no question, you're great. So is there anybody else? Or?
Leave it open,
Okay.
there's no sound coming.
You can leave these two doors open, yeah. Yeah, it's fine, come sit, honey.
Okay.
So we have to make, it's equal, I was gonna take a joke out of the, now we have music, yeah. Okay. Can't help it.
Oh, well.
I was gonna take a joke out. Maybe we could ask them to be quieter, like softer.
I
No?
already asked them.
I know, but they don't remember because they're musicians and they want to play. That's their thing. So anyway, I was going to take a joke out, but I realized it wouldn't be fair because if we're going to make fun of women, we have to make fun of men too. So it can't be one way or the other. So Lillian and Esty,
Oh, no, not.
two elderly. Oh no, not
I
that
actually
joke.
love all.
Judy's heard all the jokes dozens of times. So Lillian and Esty, two elderly Jewish widows in Florida in an adult community, are curious about the latest arrival in their building, a quiet, good-looking gentleman who keeps to himself. Esty says, Lily, you know, I'm shy. Why don't you go over to him at the pool and find out a little bit about him? He looks so lonely. Lillian agrees, and later that day at the pool, she walks up to him and says, excuse me, sir. Excuse me, mister. I hope I'm not prying, but my friend and I were wondering why you look so lonely. Well, he says, of course I'm lonely. I spent the last 25 years in prison. You're kidding, she says. What for? For killing my third wife. I strangled her. Oh my gosh, she says, what happened to your second wife? Her, I shot her. Oh my goodness, she says, if I'm not being too nosy, what happened to your first wife? Oh, we had a fight and somehow she fell out of a window. Oh my gosh, says Lillian. Then she turns to her friend on the other side of the pool. Yoo-hoo, Esty, he's single. So we need an equally terrible joke about men, right? So a Jewish man locks himself out of his car on a hot summer day, and he looks through the garbage and he finds a wire hanger, and he goes back to his car and he tries to pry open the lock. He shoves the wire through the slightly open window, and his wife is yelling at him the whole time. Yitzchak, move it to the right, move it to the left, a little higher, a little lower. Finally, his wife says to him, what is taking you so long? And Yitzchak says to her, it's easy for you to say, sitting inside an air-conditioned car. Aren't they terrible? I love these bad jokes. So I have two more. No, these are better jokes. Now we get to the better jokes. So 78, wait a minute. And the last joke is actually a good one. So this is a Russian joke. You know, I told some Russian jokes before because the Jews, of course, were very oppressed in the Soviet Union for roughly 70 years, from the Russian Revolution, 1917, to the Aliyah, when a million Russians came to Israel, which really changed Israel in some ways, many ways for the better, in some ways, okay. So, so Sarah Rabinovich emigrates to America, but Avram Rabinowitz stays back in Russia. Before they part, the couple work out a code. Anything that I write in black ink is true, Abraham says, and anything in red ink is false. Sometime later, Sarah receives a letter in black ink. Life here in Russia is getting better every day. This year's selection of clothing is stylish and affordable. Meat is so plentiful, you can't make up your mind which cut of meat to buy. The only problem I have is very small by comparison. I can't find a red pen anywhere. Right. So the last joke is I get to tell this one because I had a good friend in Bend, Father Radloff, Jim Radloff, and we used to visit. We'd walk in the forest. There was a urban forest near our house, 30 acres of forest, and we would walk there and visit. So there's a basis of truth to this story. So just so you know, so a priest and a rabbi are visiting, and they get to talking. They talk about baseball. They talk about different things, and at some point, they start to discuss their careers. And the priest says to the rabbi, "So, what is your ambition? What is your goal? What do you think you'd like to accomplish?" "Well, he says, I could get a bigger congregation. I could get a little more prestigious community. I could go upscale a little bit." And then the priest says, and then what would you do?" He says, "Well, I could even get a bigger congregation. Maybe I could get, a really major synagogue, or I could go to New York, or maybe Los Angeles and get a big gig." And after a while, so they sit some more, and then the rabbi says to the priest, he says, "And how about you?" He says, "Where are you going with your career? What kind of ambition do you have?" He says, "Well, I mean, I could, I guess, one day I could be the bishop, I could get to that." And the rabbi says, "And then, after that, what would you do?" Well, I mean, theoretically, I could become a cardinal." And then the rabbi says, "And then what would you have for an ambition?" He says, "Well, look, it's almost impossible, but it's not like technically impossible, but it's basically impossible. But I suppose, I don't even want to say it, but I suppose I could become the Pope." And the rabbi says, "And then?" and the priest says, "And then what? Am I supposed to become God?" And the rabbi says, "One of our boys made it." So we're learning about him tonight, right? So I want to do a quick review about a few concepts, just in case I don't want to lose anybody along the way. There's a lot of dots, and I want to connect all the dots for us, right? So the prophets we learned about, 750 BC onward, undermined the priesthood. The Babylonian conquest in 586 BC. Then 50 years later, the Persians conquered the Babylonians and allowed the Jews to return with Ezra and Nehemiah. A few years after that, a few centuries after that, the Greeks with Alexander conquered the Persians and bring in Hellenism, basically Greek culture to Greekify the Jews. Gymnasiums, statues, temples, philosophy, the Epicurean lifestyle, what's known in Hebrew as apikoros, right? The apikoros lifestyle of seeking pleasure as the main justification, if you will, for life. And Jews react in three ways, because this is a great challenge to the Jews. It's a direct challenge to them. So the three possible ways to react to this are accommodate, assimilate, and live apart. Basically, stay Jewish at home, but be Greek in the marketplace. They could assimilate and just be Greek at home and Greek in the marketplace, or they could move down to the Dead Sea caves and be Essenes and not have anything to do with the material world. And we see the same thing in America today.
Just Epicureanism, at least my understanding, is a life of moderation.
Oh, that's
extremes of any pleasure or pain.
okay.
So it's almost, it's close to Stoicism, but not quite that. It doesn't reject pleasure, but it definitely feels that if you overindulge, then you've lost your way. So
Okay.
it's very much the moderate lifestyle.
Okay. This is a different understanding that I have of it. So from the Jewish perspective, I think they viewed the Greeks as being pleasure seeking and not having the Torah as a basis of behavior and law. I mean, that kind of thing. So
Yeah, there's nothing strange to an Epicurean. Anything, you can eat anything, you can be with anyone.
right.
where
exactly.
That's where it would be different.
That was very different than Jews who followed the Torah in those days, and even in these days. So the same thing happens in America today. We see it today. There are Jews who live in Muncie, New York, or Kiryas Yoel back in the East Coast, and they live their entire lives within a Jewish milieu. And there are Jews like me. Obviously, I'm a accommodationist. Here we are in church, right? So I mean, I'm in the world very much so. And then there are people that are assimilated to the point that they don't practice Judaism really at all anymore. They basically don't do it. So a few years later, you have the revolt against the Greeks, against Hellenism. And that revolt results in the Hanukkah story, the civil war between the Sadducees and the Pharisees, but also against the Greeks. And that brings in the new dynasty, a new dynasty called the Hasmonean dynasty. And the last queen of the Hasmonean dynasty is Alexandra, who I always like to talk about her. She brought in universal literacy so that the Jews were obligated to teach. All boys had to learn to read, and many girls as well. And she dies in about the year 70 BC. Her sons, Aristobulus and Hyrcanus, so you know they were already very Greek because they all had Greek names. She was married to a man with a Greek name, and she had herself a Greek name, and her boys had Greek names. So she was very Greekified already. But she dies, and then within a few years, her sons are fighting for the throne, and they argue with each other, and they call in Rome to settle the dispute. And of course, we know that if a cow and a goat have an argument, and they call in a lion to settle it, the lion will do what? Eat them both, and that's what happened. So, and Rome took over Judea in the year 63. So I forgot my book last time, but this is from Max DeMott, Jews, God, and History. So if you want to read Jewish history that reads like an adventure novel, this is the one. It's really well written. He used to come to our town back in Pennsylvania once a year and give a lecture, and my parents always went to hear Max DeMott. They just love this guy. And he's gone a few years now, well, quite a few years now. So here's what he says about Rome in those days. Whatever law had prevailed in Rome in the past broke down in this century. In other words, the first century BC. The rapacity, corruption, cruelty, which had always characterized her rule, reached a new crescendo. Justice, as well as public office, was bought. Bribery became an honored public occupation. Bills of attainder disguised as laws cheated the people of their lands. Money lending at usurious rates of 10% a month was a patrician privilege. Defaulting small debtors could be broken on the rack. They would be basically killed if they didn't pay. Selling one's children into slavery to escape this cruel fate was so common that it no longer elicited compassion. Successful wars had flooded the country with slaves in such abundance that free labor and free enterprise practically disappeared. Why should you work when you had 3 slaves at home? Why should you do anything, right? It corrupted the country completely. One demagogue after another succeeded to power by bribery and treachery. Some Roman emperors lasted for 3 weeks before they were murdered. They butchered their opponents. They graced the Senate with the severed heads of the slain. Now, we have some political issues in this country. I grant you, but you don't find crucified members of Congress, when you walk into Congress and you don't see any people that have been killed, right? Lining the walls. And they line the highways with crucified bodies of their captives and on and on and on. So Rome was, for all that she was organized and powerful, she was brutal and corrupt. So you have to really understand the depth of depravity that was Rome in those days. It was horrendous. So that's the first thing. So there was turmoil. Herod was brought in as a procurator. He was from Idumean in stock. There were procurators, there was oppression, there was murder, there was corruption in the temple and collaborators. And this is the world that Yoshki was born into. Yoshki is the Yiddish for Jesus. I always refer to him that way because that's how my grandmother did. So, and she meant it with a great affection. She always would say Yoshki and she would smile. It wasn't like, Christianity was viewed as an oppressive religion relative to Judaism, but she didn't take it out on Yoshki. She didn't take it out on Jesus in any way. He was one of ours, always. Yeah.
How do you spell Yoshki?
Who knows? Like Yushke, like Yoshki, yeah. It's like yeah. So it's a affectionate way, right? Like I have a friend whose name is Jonathan. I call him Yanison, so that Yiddishize his name. So how? Oh, I apologize. Oh, I didn't do music yet. Where's my brain? I got all into the jokes and I forgot them. We have wonderful music for you. So let me do music. I don't want to shortchange you on the music. So this is Richard Kaplan and Michael Ziegler, who took music from North African Jewish tradition and Middle Eastern Jewish tradition. And you can hear hopefully you can hear the Middle Eastern influence in the music. And if we play it really loud, maybe we can annoy them. What do you think? No. So and I had the joy, I knew Richard Kaplan. He died very recently, unfortunately. This is the call to prayer, the Baruch Hu, for the Jews in the room. Isn't it nice? So different. Okay, so that's the first one. That's the call to prayer that you hear all the time in the synagogue. And that's just a whole different way to do it. I mean, isn't it gorgeous? I mean, the Jews appreciate it more because they know how we do it the other way. And here, I just remembered something funny. I called a woman today who's a travel agent in Seattle, and her name is Ashkenazi, like Askenazi, that's what Jews from Germany are called. So I said, "Oh, your name is Ashkenazi. Are you Jewish?" And she said, "Yes, I'm Sephardi." she comes from Spain somehow, but her name is Ashkenazi. It was really funny. Anyway, so the next one is Hallelujah. This is also Michael Ziegler and Richard. They were from the Bay Area. They were from San Francisco, but they traveled the world and they gathered music. Beautiful. And the next one, I want to say hi to Paul and John, I see, and also Taylor is here. Wow, hi. So, and hi, hi, Moose. Hi. Doesn't see. Anyway, the third one is, this is Ofra Chaza. Ofra Chaza is a big voice you'll hear. She's an Israeli artist from, I think, the 70s and 80s. She was big when I was there. Her name, she's from Mizrahi stock. She's from, her parents and great-grandparents lived in the Middle East for a long, long time. So her name is Ofra Chaza. So this is her, what is she singing? I don't remember. Lecha Dodi. Bigger, bigger, bigger. She's good. Listen. Hear the Middle East in it. You can hear a little Arabic. Listen, very Arabic. It's so Arabic. No? No? Ready to dance? Okay, so you can hear that way of doing it. And here's another one, another version of Lecha Dodi. Right, this is something we sing on Friday nights. Right, Lecha Dodi, Lekrat Kala. Also very Middle Eastern. Why not? That's where we're from.
What does Lecha Dodi mean?
Lecha Dodi is in a second. So Lecha Dodi is a song about the Sabbath bride, and the imagery of the Sabbath is of a bride, right? It's a feminine image, and it's of a bride. So this is a welcoming song for her. And every Shabbat where this was written, which was in Tzfat in the 1500s, the Jews that escaped from Spain, some of them went to Rhodes, some of them went to Turkey, some of them went to different Greek islands. Some of them ended up in northern Israel, and they created a lot of the service that we do Friday nights. And they would go out into the field as the sun was setting, and they would sing to her that she should come and bless them. So that's the Sabbath bride. So thank you, Joshua, for reminding us. Good thing we heard the music, right? Now the people on Zoom could hear the music too? Oh, could you hear the music okay? John's giving me a yes. Okay, good, good, good. Thank you. So we get to the question, we get to the time of the birth of Jesus, the birth of Yashki, the birth of, in Hebrew, Yeshua ben Yosef, right? And so I want to hand these out. And I didn't want to give them to you last week because I want to do them together. I think there's 4 people in this row, and then there's so many in this row. But you want to hand those back, actually. And then, yeah, and then I could get one to David. So here's, oh, okay. So here's David needs one, or David has one. You need one. There you go. And then the back row, B, can you pass these back too?
No, not yet.
I think we might have enough. Yeah, they're coming, they're coming. Yes, they're coming. So let's find out if Jesus was Jewish, and if he was Jewish, how Jewish was he, right? So let's see how he does on this little cheat sheet that I worked out. What?
Do you have an extra one?
You want one too?
Well, I'll do it.
You can show it to the people? Oh, great. So Josh is going to show it to you. How sweet is that? So first of all, what's the first thing? Someone comes to me and they say they're Jewish, right? What's the first question I ask them? Was your mother Jewish? And if the answer is yes, that's the entire discussion. There's nothing else to talk about, right? I'll tell you a story about one of my bar mitzvah kids. And this is a little different because they don't teach you this in rabbi school. He came to me, he wanted to have a bar mitzvah. And it turns out, you see, he had a Jewish mother and he had a non-Jewish mother. The 2 lesbians are married to each other. And then they got divorced, and then never met. He had 3 mothers in the end. Okay. So I said to him, And he's a very smart boy. I'm not sure, but I think the donor might have been like a Nobel Prize person. It was very, very, very bright kid. So I said to him, is your mother Jewish? And he said, well, I have 3 mothers. And I said to him, is your mother Jewish? And he said, I have 3 mothers. And I said to him, I'm going to ask you one more time, and only one more time. Is your mother Jewish? He said, yes. I said, okay. How are you supposed to figure that out, right? So we're in an area where Jewish law doesn't cover. There's no such, we have to figure out how to stretch the fabric, how to make it work for another generation and another generation. So was his mother Jewish?
Yeah.
Yes. Anybody say not? Oh, okay. Did he go to synagogue regularly? Yes, I can prove it. Yeah. Did he have a good Jewish education? Yes. Could he read Hebrew?
Yes.
Could he read Aramaic?
Yes.
Was he familiar with Torah?
Yes.
Could he read from the Torah?
Yes.
Could he read from the prophets in Hebrew? We know it because Luke 4:16, because he goes to Nazareth, right? And they give him Isaiah and he reads it, right? Did he live in a Jewish neighborhood? Of course, the Galilee, right? The Galilee. Did he have Jewish friends? Yes. Not everybody he knew was his friend. Did he pray in Hebrew?
Yes.
Did he pray in Aramaic?
Yes.
I can prove that too. Did he keep kosher? Did he keep the Sabbath?
Yes.
Yes, he might have been a little liberal on the Sabbath piece. He might have been a little bit liberal on the kosher piece, but he did. Did he have a Jewish profession?
Yes.
Yeah, because here's the book. Where is David's book? Oh, shoot, I don't bring the book. Oh, yes, I did. Here, this title is Jesus, first century rabbi, right? So did he have a Jewish profession? Yes. Did he wear a talit?
Yes.
How do we know he wore a talit? Because the woman who was bleeding, right, and there's other, right. What other things do we know he did that are demonstrably Jewish? Can you think of anything?
Paid the temple tax.
He paid the temple tax. Yeah, he paid the, yeah,
Jewish holidays.
kept the holidays. Amen to that. Anything else? Peggy?
When he was of bar mitzvah age, he went up to the temple.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, yeah, like the story of Samuel and Hannah. I mean, when he was born too, they took him. Anyone else? Yeah.
He had a Jewish burial.
He had a Jewish burial. He had a Jewish death. The Romans killed a lot of Jews that way. Maybe 100,000 were crucified. That's why there were no trees in Israel for centuries, because the Romans cut down all the trees, right, to make crosses. Any other ideas?
It's written that God said, "This is my beloved son."
Right. So we're all children of God, right? So it's same way with Adam, same way with all. So you're in the Jewish tradition. So exactly. Peggy?
So for remission of sins.
Yes.
To the Jordan.
He went, yeah, and he did a mikvah. So a mikvah, beautiful. I have to write all these down now. These are great. So, okay, he was Jewish, but I'll give you that one. But was his message a Jewish message, right?
Wow.
So let's see, put up something here. Let's see what we got. The golden rule, yeah?
Right.
Hillel predates Jesus by a century.
Can people see that?
Can you see it? You can't see it. It's on page, oh darn, I was hoping you could see it. Okay, I'll read it then.
Did you give them?
I didn't give them yet. I know what I have to do. Hillel, I messed up the music, it's true, but Hillel said, what is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor. That is the whole Torah. The rest is the commentary on it. Go and learn it. That's from Hillel. Hillel predates Jesus by a century. The Talmud says, and that which you hate, do to no man. Rabbi Eliezer says something the same thing. And Matthew says, therefore, all these whatsoever you would do that men should do to you, do to them. It is actually, in some ways, not that similar. It is quite different. Because the Jewish way, it gives you permission to do nothing. In other words, if it's objectionable to you, don't do it to someone else. But this says, whatever you would do do that to someone else. Whatever you would have done to yourself, do to someone else. It's a subtle difference, but it can be sometimes a major difference too. The presence of God, right? And I'm going to give you a booklet with all. I have everybody gets their own. Right? Everybody gets one, right? So I don't want to get to those yet. I want to go over a couple first. When there are 10 sitting together and occupying themselves with Torah, the Shekhinah, that's the feminine, hovering, divine, godly presence, divine dwells among them. The same is true of 5, the same is true of 3, the same is true of 2. Even if one, as it says, in every place where I cause my name to be mentioned, I will come and bless you. Rabbi Hanina said, when 2 sit together and there is between them words of Torah, the Shekhinah dwells between them. Matthew 18:20, where 2 or 3 gathered in my name, there I am in the midst of them. So you have the same concepts. Okay, the next one.
So is Shekhinah similar to the Holy Spirit?
You know, it's a good question. I think the Holy Spirit is really Ruach HaKodesh. That's something different. The Shekhinah is, in our tradition, it's the most accessible godly presence, and it's feminine, because it's a feminine word, Shekhinah.
The
Right?
Holy Spirit is also often referred to as feminine.
Okay, so they may be close that way.
Spirit of truth. The
Yeah.
Holy Spirit.
Right,
He
right.
welcomes her to come in.
There you go. Okay, so maybe like Shekhinah. Yeah.
So is it like the Shekinah glory?
Well, that's Shekhinah. It's exactly Shekhinah is
So it's-
Shekhinah.
It's the fire and the cloud and the presence
The presence,
over the tabernacle.
Right.
and the fire.
the divine, feminine, hovering presence, you could call it. Yeah, yeah, the Shekhinah. So not by bread alone. From Deuteronomy, and he humbled you and let you hunger and fed you with manna, that he might make you know that man does not live by bread alone. Matthew 4:4, it is written, man shall not live by bread alone, right? But by every word that proceeds, and so forth. Same exact thing. From Joel 2:32, whosoever shall come on the name of the Lord shall call on the name of the Lord shall be saved. Romans, everyone who calls upon the name of the Lord will be saved. Pretty close there, pretty similar. The next one. Psalm 37, be meek, since the meek shall inherit the earth. Blessed are the meek, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven, right? So they'll inherit the earth. So you have the same concept. Okay, and one more. God is one, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. And Jesus answered them, the first of all the commandments is Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. He would have said it, of course, in Hebrew, like I just did. And then love your neighbor, you shall love your neighbor as yourself, from Leviticus. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. And this says, and the second commandment is, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. So the 3 love commandments from Torah are to love God, to love your neighbor, and what's the third one? No. You will love the stranger in your gates. The third is the stranger. And the third one is the hardest by far. The third is really hard. Okay. So I'm going to hand these out now, but I want to show you the book first. This is David Zaslow from Ashland, Oregon. Wonderful. He put so much work. This is like, they don't call it an artist proof. I think they call it a working copy or something. So this was never published, but I got one to review. He sent me one years ago, and you can tell I lost the back cover and pages are coming out of it. But it's a fabulous resource. And I copied some things for you from it. So that with his permission. And so it's, I don't know how many pages, but it's hundreds of pages, and he did so much work on this. So his name is David Zaslow, and he has a current book, this one, Jesus, First Century Rabbi. And in past classes, I'd bring 30 or 40 of them and people would buy them, but I don't have any this year. But so this is something you can get online and wherever. And this is much more succinct. This is more a scholarly work. This is more like a popular work. So just so you know, I want to just give him some credit and give him some kavod. This is Roots and Branches. He talks about roots and branches, Judaism being the actually biblical Judaism or Mosaic Judaism. I still need a good name because someone in here very brilliantly challenged the biblical Judaism name that I always used. And they said, wait a minute, the Bible for Christians is the first page is 178. This is how to save money on paper, by the way, is you start on page 178. Look at all that trees we didn't have to cut down. So if you go to the Sabbath, because the Jewish tradition is that the Sabbath was made for us, we were not made for it. So this is not a radical concept by Jesus. It is a left-leaning Pharisaic idea, but it's nothing really out of the box, so to speak. So you read to me where it says Talmud Yoma 85b. That's the page
Rabbi
it's on.
Jonathan,
Yeah.
very good. Rabbi Jonathan Bar Joseph said, the Sabbath is committed to your hands, not you to its hands.
So you have a little hint here. You know when this is, because this is when Aramaic was used, because it's Rabbi Jonathan Bar Yosef. Bar is son in Aramaic. So you know this was in Aramaic speaking times, okay? And the branches from Mark 2, the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. So the Shabbat was made for us, not us for the Shabbat. So when there's issues around Shabbat and Jesus and some more right-leaning Pharisees, right, that feel that he's not strict enough around the Shabbat. But I mean, he would be pretty much a Sabbath keeper to, these days. So let's go to page 182 and look at forgiveness. On Zoom, can you see these? Can he show them to you? Oh, you don't have them. Oh, here.
Here, Josh.
It's a lot to keep track of. No, I got it. It's a lot to keep track. So Josh is going to show them to you on Zoom, right? But how come I can't see them on Zoom?
I'm not showing it yet. You just gave it to me.
Oh, okay. But I don't see you on Zoom
I'm
either.
not on Zoom.
Well, how can you show them to them?
Don't worry about that.
He can do it. It doesn't matter. It's magic. Okay. So page 182 at the top, you're going to read for me about forgiveness. Read that to me. Judy can lead you. She's good at it.
Talmud Rosh Hashanah, 17. The house of Hillel says, the person that abounds in grace inclines the scales towards grace. The person who forgoes his right to exact punishment is forgiven all his trespasses. Who is forgiven his trespasses? One who forgives trespasses.
Okay, so that's a Jewish concept that's 100 years before him, and it was from the oral tradition, so it's probably 500, 600, 700, 800 years before him. Matthew 6, 14 and 15. For if you forgive men their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive men their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive yours. So this concept is exactly mirrored, right, in these teachings. The poor. And I'm going to tell you a story. This is a true thing. Before we get to this, I'll tell you from my perspective. When I was studying to be a rabbi, the very favorite thing that I learned, the entire years that it took me, the favorite thing I learned was this. If a poor woman comes to you, back up. If a woman comes to you with a chicken, now I've been rabbiing now for 23 years. No woman has ever come to me with a chicken to see if it's kosher or not. But in my mother's day, that was quite common. It was an animal, they weren't sure if it was kosher, they would take it to the rabbi. Is this a kosher animal or not? Even in my mother's day, she would do that once in a blue moon. But my mother's golden rule always was this. She said, if you're not sure of the answer, do not ask the rabbi. Better you don't ask than you get the answer you don't want. Okay, so there. I don't know if you missed that. Did you get that? My mother was very clever. If you don't know the answer, don't ask the rabbi. So you would think it's the other way around, but no, she knew. So if a woman comes to me with a chicken and she wants to know if it's kosher or not, there's one important question and only one that I have to ask her to determine if it's kosher or not. I have a guess, but.
Are you hungry?
No, that's good. You're in the right neighborhood. But the only thing I need to know is if she's rich or poor. If she's poor, I'll find every possible way for that chicken to be kosher. If she's wealthy, I don't like the wings a little bit. I think you need another chicken. That's business for the butcher, then, and we'll take that chicken and we're going to donate it, somewhere else. So, but if a woman is of modest means, any way that I can figure out that chicken's kosher, I'm obliged to do it. And that to me is the sweetest thing in my entire rabbinic training. I love that the most. So the poor, Leviticus 5:11 and 13. But if he cannot afford 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, this is if you're supposed to bring a ram or a bull or something. So if you can't afford the turtle dove and you can't afford pigeons, then you can bring 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour. For a 1/10 of an ephah is not much for a sin offering. Thus the priest shall make atonement for him for the sin which he has committed. Oh, wait, I'm reading your part. I'm sorry.
We'll switch.
So you guys, yeah, okay, I'll read this. Thus the priest shall make atonement for him for the sin which he has committed in any one of these things, and he shall be forgiven. So if you don't have enough money for a bull, and you don't have enough money for a ram, and you don't have enough money for a goat, and you don't have enough money for 2 turtle doves, which isn't a big deal, and you don't have enough money for a couple of pigeons, you can bring a little bit of flour, right? So this is a very egalitarian in a sense and broadened religion. Read Midrash Leviticus Rabbah. You guys read it.
Okay. Once a woman brought a handful of fine flour, and the priest despised her, saying, "See what she offers. What is there in this to eat?"
He's looking out for who? Himself. Yeah.
What is there in this to offer up? It was shown to him in a dream. Do not despise her. It is as if she had sacrificed herself as a sacrifice.
Wow. So the priest came to it legalistically and greedily, right? And what was shown to him in a dream was wrong, right? The branches mark, a poor widow came and she cast in 2 small brass coins. Those are the mites, right? The whatever it was, 100th of a shekel or something, which equal a quadrant's coin, which I don't know what that is. He called his Talmidim, his students, to himself and said to them, "Most assuredly, I tell you, this poor widow gave more than all those who are giving into the treasury." So it doesn't matter how much it is, it matters what's behind it, what the intention is, and who's giving it. If a wealthy person gives $100, whatever. If a very poor person gives $100, wow. We had people, and the fact is, some of the people in Bend who came to us that they came from a Christian tradition, they tithed. And we had wealthy doctors who made, upwards of $1 million a year, and they're given like $1,000. And then I have people who are carpenters or something making, $45,000 a year, and they're given $4,500. So, and I knew it, and I don't say anything about the money. That's not my business. But I just knew what was going on. And I thought to myself, So, okay, let's turn to page 185. How are we doing anyway? We're doing good? So here you have the Midrash. Also, Rabbah 5, this is 5:11. You could read that to me. You read
Which
the
one?
first 2.
29.
Yeah, 29, Torah, sorry, yeah.
Okay. Rabbi Alexander the Reader said,
If all the world gathered together to destroy the Yod, which is the smallest letter in the Torah, they would not succeed.
The yud is a tiny letter. I should have showed it to you when I had the Torah here. And then you have to know that on certain letters, which letters? Shin, Resh, which ones have crowns? There's like 5 or 6 letters they have like a decorative tiny crown on the top. I know Shins have them, Resh. There's 5 or 6 of them that have, oh, what?
Is that, Josh wants to know where we are for.
Is what one?
29.
Is the second letter there?
Where, what? I don't see. There's no, Harab David Zaz, no, that's Rabbi David Zaslow's name. There's no yud in it. Sorry. It would be half the size of those letters.
It's like an apostrophe.
It's like an apostrophe, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like like a comma, like upside down comma or apostrophe. So, what, question?
Yeah, isn't the apostrophe the first letter of the word Israel?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Yes, it is, exactly. Are you wearing it?
Yeah.
You are wearing it, so you can stand up and show everybody.
No.
So the first letter,
You
you don't want to stand up and show?
Model.
It's the first letter, but it goes from right to left. So, see, it goes this way, it goes that way.
Yeah.
You can see it's a tiny letter, right?
That's it. Oh.
Well done. What a class, I'm telling you. What a class, wow. This class has class. So read the next one on Philo, because Philo, by the way, what clue do you see here in this first one that you just read to me? Rabbi who?
Alexander.
So what do you know right away? He was after Alexander the Great. So we know he's 2nd or 1st century BC because nobody was named Alexander before Alexander, right? Okay, so Philo, what did Philo say?
The Torah is immortal, the sun and the moon and the whole of heaven exists.
And Matthew, for truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one yud and not one crown, the decorations on the letters, will pass from the Torah until all is accomplished, right? So this is true, and we know this. It's still here. We're still here. Praying for enemies. So read to me if your enemy is hungry.
If your enemy is hungry, give him bread to eat, and if he is thirsty, give him water to drink.
That's from Proverbs. And what does the Talmud teach?
There was once a Bible in the neighborhood of Rabbi Meir, who caused him a great deal of trouble. Rabbi Meir accordingly prayed that they should die. His wife Uriah said to him, rather pray for them that they should repent, and there will be no more wicked. He did pray for them, and they repented.
How do you like that? His wife is like way smarter, right? Matthew, love your enemies and pray for them who hate you. Pray for those who persecute you. So you have the same concept, the same theme over and over and over and over. We see it. So the next page is 186. She's a wonderful singer next door, isn't she? It's just gorgeous. Temple service, right? So the temple service, which involved malacha, the temple service involved work, right? You can't sacrifice an animal and do all these things without working, right? The temple service takes precedence over Shabbat, over the Sabbath, right? So then you have, the next one is the Midrash. Shabbat was made for people, not people for Shabbat, so that the people are the master over Shabbat with some limitations, okay? Read for me what Matthew said.
That on the Sabbath days, the priests in the temple proclaim the Sabbath and are blameless.
Absolutely. So how is it possible that the temple involving fire, involving work, all that stuff was able to be done on the Sabbath when it was directly in violation of Shabbat? It's a good point. So the presence of God, we already read that one on the screen, right? Wherever there are two or more in my name, right, I will be among you. So we already have that one. At page 192. Love mercy and love the Lord, right? 192. So, and this gets back to the prophets undermining the priesthood, right? So read for me, Micah.
Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams? Shall I give my firstborn to my transgression? He has shown you, O man, what is good, to do justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God.
And Deuteronomy, read.
And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength.
And the Jews in the room can say that for me in Hebrew.
Yeah.
ואהבת את אדוני בכל נפשך ובכל מאודך.
והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ישמעתם בניך ודיבר טובה בישיבתך וישעריך. And I just got lost.
Yes, that's good. You got it. So, right.
I grew up reformed.
Yes.
so-
Yes, okay. And the branch mark is, and to love him with a capital H, with all your heart, with all the understanding, and with all the soul, and with all your strength. He's literally taking, this is exactly from Deuteronomy and exactly from, which is now in our prayer book. We say it every time we have a service, is more than all burnt offerings and all sacrifices. So the continuation of the undermining of the priesthood also is in the Junior Testament. So we have 194 also, I think.
I have a question. related
Yes,
to that.
yes.
So at the beginning, we said to love God, love your neighbor, and love the stranger in your midst.
That's
Is
it.
that the third one?
That's the third one.
And I was thinking the Christian church doesn't really have an equivalent of that loving the stranger in your midst requirement. And therefore, I think the Jewish religion is much better at supporting refugees than the Christians are.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. But I do know, I mean, it was always a wonder to me when, I went to Israel, I think in 2010, and I met Vietnamese people who were, their mother tongue was Hebrew. And I just thought it was amazing, because they came as boat people. Israel took in refugees from Vietnam. They took, I don't know, a few thousand, I'm not sure how many. But I'll never forget, I was in Jerusalem and I was sitting on a park bench and a man sits down, clearly, or, Vietnamese looking, and with his daughter, and they start talking in Hebrew to each other. I'm going, what? I'm like, are you kidding? It was so neat. It was so amazing. So there is a tradition to take in refugees. It's true. And there was the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society was highest, which was very big early on, 1880s, 90s to early 1900s for Jewish refugees and for non-Jewish refugees too. And they set up soup kitchens and they did things for work, and they did like free loan societies where if a woman wanted to set up, say, for example, a sewing business or something, they would loan her money to buy a sewing machine. And even today, we have a friend in Bend who went to Africa. How many did she take? Do you remember? 10 or 12 sewing machines, because African women in certain tribes, they can't make enough money to become independent. And so she taught them to sew school uniforms for children, and they would sell them and be independent, and they could leave bad relationships, or they could make their own choices. So she did. I mean, she was such a, what we call a tzaddikas. She was such a righteous woman to take these sewing machines to Africa and to be a beacon really for these women to become out of poverty, and they had no other way to get started. And she showed them how to do it. She was a master seamstress herself, and she used to make coats and pants and shirts out of plastic bags, and it was called upcycling. She would upcycle. She would make purses and she would make wallets. I still have a wallet from her that she made for me out of plastic bags. So yeah, somebody had something done.
If you have at one time been a refugee yourself, then it's so much easier to identify with those who are refugees.
Right.
Now.
Right. And, we always say every year we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. And we never say that our ancestors were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. We say that we were Avadim Hayinu. We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. Right. So we envision ourselves as slaves, that we were slaves and we got out. Right. So then how could you not help someone else get out? Right. So that's true. But anyway, there were, slave owners, Jewish slave owners in the South of America, not many, but there were a few. So I don't give them a complete pass on that. So let's look at 194. fed by God, right? The root is Psalms, right? Psalm 147. So you read that to me. Look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. So the same exact concept over and over and over and over. And I want to thank David Zaslow for doing the work for us. So the next page is the Beatitudes, right? Or not the bad attitudes, it's the, right? So the next page is 198. I want to make sure I do this in order. So what do you want to do? You want to read the root or do you want to read the branch? It's up to you. Let's do a vote. Who says root? You want to read the root? I got 2 votes, not many, 3 votes. 3 votes? Oh, who wants to read the branch? We don't care. Okay. Well, we can divide the class. How about that? If you want to read the root, read it with me. If you want to read the branch, who's going to lead you for the branch? Judy will lead you for the branch. So, well, let's start with the root. And we stop. You see where the line, I drew a line there, because that tells you where to stop, because otherwise you wouldn't know where to stop. And the Jewish source is right here for all these things. He who is lowly in spirit shall obtain honor.
Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom.
He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds.
Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted.
The meek shall inherit the earth and delight themselves in the abundance of peace.
Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth.
You do bless the righteous, O Lord. You do encompass him with favor as with a shield.
Blessed are those that hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied.
Whoever has mercy, no one's reading with me, I noticed.
Oh,
I thought there were people that wanted to do the root.
I'll read.
Please, I'll slow down. Okay. Whoever has mercy upon creatures will be granted mercy from heaven.
Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy.
And you know, there's a lot of truth to this, because young kids, if you see a child who's cruel to cats or to dogs or to animals, it's a very bad sign. It's a very bad sign for how they're going to grow. It's a very strong possibility that they'll be a sociopath when they grow up. It just is a known thing. Okay. So whoever has mercy, we did that one. Okay, root team, the root team. Who shall ascend the mount of the Lord, and who shall stand in his holy place? He who has clean and a pure heart. Okay.
Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God.
Wait. Seek peace. Hold on. Oh, seek peace and pursue it. And then you read, blessed are the peacemakers.
There's a line there.
Yeah. Aaron. Okay, let's read Aaron, my team. Aaron loved peace and pursued peace and made peace between person and person. So I think there you read, blessed are the peacemakers.
No, oh.
Yes.
Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God.
Right. A person should always try to be among the persecuted rather than the persecutors.
Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
It's interesting. A person should try to be among the persecuted. The Jews didn't have to try very hard. It wasn't really something we tried, okay? The root team, princes have persecuted me without a cause, but my heart stands in awe of thy word. Blessed dwell in your house. May they always continue to praise you. So,
Blessed are you when men revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account.
okay, so does this sound familiar? This is maybe more lyrical, more beautiful, more succinct. I love the poetry of it, but we have the same concepts. In other words, both do. So Avinu Shabbat Shamayim is on 201. Right, and Av, does anybody know what Av is?
Oh, Father.
Av is Father, so Avinu is our Father, right? So the same exact thing, we'll do the same thing. So I'll read it here. And then I'm going to ask the Jews a question. Our Father who is in heaven. Do we say that ever? Avinu Shabbat
Sure.
So go, oh, yeah, of course we do.
Yeah.
Avinu Shabbat Shamayim, our Father who's in heaven, exalted and hallowed be thy great name. Now, where do you see that? No. In the Jewish side, on the Jewish, where are they talking to? I don't have a lot of Jews in here. Okay, so where do we see that? Exalted and hallowed be thy great name. I'm going to tell you, Yid Gadal v'Yid Kadash Shemei Rabbi. You ever heard that before? Only a million times, right? So, but did you know it was exalted and hallowed be thy great name? Right, okay, one says yes, one says no. Perfect. We're Jews, we can't agree, right? So, thine is the kingdom, for heaven and earth are one dominion. So now you read the branch.
Thy kingdom come.
No, our Father who art in heaven. Did you read that already?
No.
I didn't think so. Okay,
Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
behold, you will rain bread from heaven, and the people shall go out and gather a certain portion every day.
Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors.
Every creditor that lends to his neighbor shall release the debt. This is the law. This is the law of the sabbatical year and the law of the Jubilee year, right? The 7th year and the 49th, the 50th year, right? That's the law. It's in Deuteronomy to release debt. So you read, did you read? You read it already. The Lord will deliver us in the day of evil. What do you say?
And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
Deliver us from evil. Yours, O Lord, is the greatness. This I'll do for you in Hebrew. L'cho Adonai, hagdula v'hagavura v'hateferet v'netzach v'hod. When you take the Torah out, right? We're going to do it on Shabbat, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is what you sing. Yours, O Lord, is the greatness and the power and the glory and the victory. L'cha Adonai, hagedula, v'hagavura, v'hateferet, v'netzach, v'hod, la 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 la. Right? So we do this. This is not like, but you don't recognize it in the English, right? And the Christians don't recognize it in the Hebrew. But it's the same thing. So now you can recognize it, right? Because thank you, David Zaslow. So read the last one.
For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen.
Amen. So there you go. Thank you so much.
I think that last sentence was added in later centuries.
Okay,
It
I
wasn't
don't know.
part of the original gospel
Okay,
that Jesus was quoted saying.
okay,
So I didn't realize the original came from the Jewish.
right. Comes from Chronicles, right? Right. And we use it every Saturday. It's part of the Torah service. When you take the Torah out of the ark and you march around with it, that's what you sing right there.
And
Okay.
that particular portion wasn't added to the Catholic Mass where they do the Our Father until probably the 70s.
Okay, the 1970s.
1970s, yeah.
Wow, okay.
They thought that they took it from the Protestants, it's like they were being ecumenical.
Oh, okay.
It'll be nice to them and add it, and
Okay,
yet everyone was taking it from.
of course, of course.
But we have to not forget that these are translations into English.
Right.
So,
They are translations into English, and they are the best we can do. And I will tell you this. I'm not a Greek scholar. I'm not knowledgeable in Greek at all. I've been to Greece like twice in my life, you know. And so I mean, I can't tell you how accurate the translations are from the Greek to this. I can tell you from the Hebrew, but I cannot tell you from the Greek. So I just want to tell you that, right? I mean, right, to be very frank about it, that I'm not that. So I want to read for us a little bit, and I want to check on my timeline here.
Are we finished with this handout? Jim?
We are finished with that handout for now. And I want to read to us from Constantine. If you want to buy it, I mean, if you have like a year that you don't know what to do with, you can buy this book and maybe you'll get through it, right? It's Constantine. I'll show it to everyone. Constantine's sword. And you know about his sword. I mean, he had the vision and everything. And then after a while, Rome becomes Christian. the rest is history, right? So he is a defrocked priest, and so is my friend in Bend, actually. He had a problem with the bishop, and Catholic Church is hierarchical. And when you become a priest, you pledge fealty to the bishop, not to the Pope, not to the people, not to the church. You pledge fealty to the bishop, that he is your, he is the authority, right? Yeah,
Not all do. If you're a religious order like the Jesuits or the
Right.
Benedictines, it's to the abbot or to the head of the order. It's
Okay.
only the parish.
parish priest. Well, that's who, yeah. But anyway, that was what he explained to me, and that the bishop, he was a very radically open and welcoming kind of a priest, and in the model, I mean, after Jesus himself, a radical openness, and there was problems there with, I mean, women weren't allowed to do certain things, gay people weren't allowed. There was different things, and he just said, "What part of everyone don't you get?" That was his thing, and for that he got sent to Southern Oregon, to like the smallest diocese. They had like more sheep than people, or more goats than people, and he was basically expelled, but like softly expelled. And then he petitioned. He actually went to Rome, and he petitioned his case, and he tried to be reinstated, and it was rejected because the bishop is the law. I mean, that was it. It's like you're in the army and you're a lieutenant and this is your captain or your major. You can't go. It's hierarchical. It's just the way it is. It's like the temple was, Yeah, a story.
I was at a monastery during a retreat, and there was a young man, youngish, and he happened to be a priest. But what had happened was a good friend of his, who had been his mentor and had brought him into the priesthood, had taught him in the seminary, all of that. But that man wanted to marry his long-term boyfriend, essentially.
okay.
He had disconnected himself from the church, but it takes a year. And
Yeah.
during that year, he was receiving money from, to help him transition.
Uh-huh.
Anyhow, he decided to marry
Yeah,
the man,
Yeah.
and his mentee
yeah.
attended the wedding and wore, because he was a priest, right, wore the stole.
Oh,
And the archbishop,
Big-
which is in LA,
big trouble.
had sent spies to
Oh,
and they took this young man who's just blameless and wonderful.
oh,
And he was made to spend a year of penance at this monastery. He was not taken out of the priesthood, but he could not do the mass. He could not do the sacraments. They basically made him into a child
right.
again. They took
Yeah.
everything that he had built his whole life on
Wow.
away from him to
Wow.
teach him a lesson.
Wow.
I never knew what, happened to him. I'm hoping he left.
Yeah.
But that's how
That's,
hierarchical they are.
it's absolutely hierarchical. There's no question about it. That's all there is to it. I'm looking for something in here, so I need something. So good. So this is from Constantine's sword, which I love it very much. For Jeremiah, this is page 118, if you want to know. For Jeremiah and for Jesus, there was only one covenant. So we are not talking here about Judaism's being brought to fulfillment in the discontinuous message of a different movement. The point again is that Jesus offers a Jewish renewal, and it is tied to love. Jesus' message was thus rooted not only, say, in the opening chapters of Genesis, but in the piety of Judaism as such. I read it as a Christian. This is James Carroll speaking. I read it as a Christian, yet the record of the Torah seems clear. Before God gave commandments, God gave blessings. Before the law, there was the rescue from Egypt. Hosea, Isaiah, and the other prophets strike the theme repeatedly. If Israel behaves like a faithless wife, sometimes provoking God's rage, God nevertheless takes her back every time. Nothing Israel does can undo this love. The Jewish attitude is one of love, period, he says. And historically, Christians have used these definitions let's see, I guess I have to, well, it's a little complicated, but to show, as Susanna Heschel says, Susanna Heschel is Joshua Heschel's daughter, is Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel's daughter. Susanna Heschel says, we have always been desperate, that as Christians have always been desperate, to that, yes, indeed, with Jesus, something new and unprecedented had broken through to the human realm. Never mind that in order to do this, Christians have to redefine Judaism in the narrowest terms and with grave consequences in the most negative terms. Judaism had to be the shadow against which Christianity could be the light. Nowhere has this dynamic been more forceful or more damaging than on the matter of love. Yet the fact remains that nowhere more pointedly than on this matter of love was Jesus a faithful Jew. He was proclaiming the love of the Jewish God. What Jesus foresaw as a consequence of his arrival in Jerusalem that fateful week, we do not know, but there would have been no surprise that it meant suffering. Presumably, he had already experienced the conflict between the attitude of radical openness that he advocated and the male-fisted defensiveness of the imperium of Rome. He would have known what had happened to his mentor, John the Baptist, and to countless others of his generation who, in large and small ways, had defied Rome. The buzzard-ridden remains of some of those may well have lined the road into Jerusalem as he entered. The cross, which to us is a ubiquitous symbol of a certain religion, was to Jesus, as a Jew, an equally ubiquitous symbol of a certain politics, the deadly politics of Rome. Political and social context, to repeat the mantra, is of overriding importance. The horrid, ignoble death by crucifixion at the hands of Rome would have become, even before Pilate, a point of Jewish pride. Remember what Josephus said, we face death on behalf of our laws with a courage which no other nation can match. And how was it that Jews mustered such courage? In the case of Jesus, we have an answer. His message of love, based in tradition, opened into life, abundant life. In the phrase John attributes to him, life that can be expected to overcome death, because life to the full is what the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob offers as a measure of God's love. The ongoing life of the people Israel is the proof of this love. So there's more. I'm trying to see if there's a piece that I can make this a little bit shorter. The biblical record attests from the first verse on to the most basic Jewish belief, which is the belief in the power of God to create life. Right? Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. Right? In the beginning, God created. Right? Nothing Rome does, nothing any human does, can take away that power. Life is the fundamental principle of morality, undergirding all the commandments, which always ask, what is for life? You are allowed to what's the word? To go against something, to oppose or to transgress, if you will, virtually every commandment in order to save a life. There are a few very small, strange exceptions, but they're very small and very unlikely to ever happen. But you are allowed to do anything, almost, regardless of what the law says, to save a life. And so life is the sign of faith, never affirmed more than when death seems imminent. You know, Israel, during the civil war in Syria, Israel took in thousands and thousands of Syrian refugees, and they would treat them most of them were in Haifa, they were treated in Haifa. And you would have an Arab from Syria, which is a sworn enemy of Israel, in the bed right next to a Jewish person, you know, and they treated thousands and thousands of refugees, right? Just so you know. And that's why you have a preponderance of Jewish doctors, right? Because it's saving life, right? Each human instance of death is a return to the first chaos of Genesis. What God did then out of love, God does now. So life is the distilled word for hope, as one hears in every Jewish toast. L'chaim, right? What do we always say? To life. For all this, Jesus of Galilee came to the end, fully aware of what a man like him, with a message like his, in a place like that, at that particular time, was up against. The point is that his courage was Jewish courage. His faith in God was Jewish faith. And perhaps surprisingly to all observers by now, the last turn in his story, from brutal death to new life, a sign of God's vindicating love, was Jewish before it was anyone's. So this is from James Carroll, and I love how he writes, and I love what he writes. So I want to read us now, and I see our time frame. I want to read us Psalm 22, which is on page, I don't know. Psalm 22, here it is, 1434. I want to read to you Psalm 22. I'm going to start it. This is also attributed to David. It's Al Ayela Tashachar, on the rising of the darkness, on the dawn, for the leader at dawn, a psalm of David. Eli, Eli, lama azabtani. My God, why have you abandoned me? Rechok mishuati divrei, right? Sha'agarti. Why have you abandoned me? Why are you so far from delivering me and not hearing my anguish? Right? That's Psalm 22. I'm going to sing you a song which you don't know. Maybe the Jews do know. There's a song written by a young Jewish woman. She was murdered when she was 23. She was born in 1921 in Hungary. Her name is Chana Senesh. And the Jews may have heard of her. Chana Senesh went to Israel, to Palestine in those days. In 1939, she lived there a couple of years. She worked. She learned Hebrew. But she's a native Hungarian and a native speaker. So she was recruited to learn to be a paratrooper, parachutist. And they dropped her back in Hungary to try to help the Jews of Hungary. Unfortunately, she was captured and she was tortured and she was murdered by the Nazis when she was 23 years old in 1944. It's hard for me to do this. She wrote a poem. She wrote many poems. There's 4 or 5 books of her poems. Once again, she was only 23. So how much time did she have to write poems? Eli, you hear the first word. Did you hear it from Psalms? I read Eli, Eli. Eli, Eli, shelo yegamer leolam, hachol v'hayam, rishru shel hamayim, barak hashamayim, tefilat adam. Eli, Eli. So there's a direct line, a 3,000-year chain from King David to Chana Senesh. Right? You can hear it. Eli, Eli. Where did she get it from? Right? But that chain also has others on it. So turn in your, my God, you don't have to translate it. Okay. On the back of your books on page 189. Psalm 22. Eli, Eli, lama azabtani. Why have you abandoned me? Let's all read it together. The second one, Matthew 27:46. And about the 9th hour, Jesus cried with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. Why have you forsaken me? He says it in Aramaic. Lama sabachthani. Why have you forsaken me? He quotes Psalms. His last thing that he says. Eli, Eli. Chana Senesh quotes Psalms. right? 2,000 years later, 1900 years. Eli, Eli, shelo yigamer leolam, hachol v'hayam, rishru shel hamayim, barak hashamayim, tefilat adam, Eli, Eli. My God, why have you abandoned me?
But doesn't
So-
that song end in a hopeful?
The song? Well, yeah, but this is the thing, is that this is the connection. I'm trying to create for you a string and a rope or a chain between the Psalm from David, between Jesus 1,000 years later, and Chana Senesh 1,900 years even more later, right? So you have those connections. Chana Senesh was murdered by the Nazis. Jesus was murdered by the Romans. How much more connected could it be? The same words, Eli, Eli, the same words, the same idea. So there's a lot more to talk about, but I think this is a good place perhaps to stop. And next week, we're going to talk about how things went wrong and between Jews and Christians, and also, and then the revolt against Rome in the year 67 and what happens there. And as much as I can squeeze in, and then also like what Jews kept from our biblical root and what Christians kept from our biblical root. And Jews kept more things, but Christians kept some things that you might be surprised by, that Jews did not keep. So you'll hear about that. I hope next week I can kind of do a little bit, squishing. So are there any questions or anything? Yeah.
I know that with Psalm 22 and the idea of Jesus, some of his last words being asking why God has forsaken him, is something that troubles a lot of people, and people really wonder why he asked that when for so long we see like, oh yeah, they have this connection, he calls him Father. How has this discomfort with the idea of being forsaken or abandoned by God, how is it handled, at least in how might a Jewish context change how we see this?
If you see him as a Jew and you see him quoting Psalms, I'm sure people were saying, Eli, Eli, lama azabtani, in the trains on the way to the gas chambers. I think people would say these kinds of things. I have a friend in Bend whose grandfather told him that when the Cossacks came through during a pogrom, he was a small child, and they would hide him in an empty pickle barrel. They would hide him in a pickle barrel. They wouldn't submerge him in the pickles, but that was how he survived, was they hid him in a pickle barrel. So I think, the persecution from Rome to Nazi times, through Russian times, through Spanish Inquisition times, you'll find the same kinds of themes, the same kinds of things when Jews were broken on the rack in 1492 or 1493 or 1494 by Torquemada during the Spanish Inquisition. They would say the same kinds of things. It wasn't in any way different or strange or unusual. And it's not unusual in Jewish prayers to pray to the Father. Avinu Shabashamayim. It's in our Siddur, it's in our prayer books, right? Avinu Shabashamayim. We sing it all the time. So this is not in any way unusual or out of context, okay, at that moment, right? What happens later, right? So, but at that moment, it makes perfect sense. He was one of tens of thousands of martyrs, hundreds of thousands possibly of Jews who were murdered by the Romans. And some of them may have said really nasty things about Rome before they died. Some of them may have just said, I want my mommy. I don't know what they said, but some of them said the Shema, some said whatever they said. But, it's like what is it, the James Taylor song, Going to Carolina in My Mind, right? So in your mind, you go back to what you learned as a child. You go back to Psalms, you go back to the Torah, you go back to the source, right? That's what you do. Yeah.
At the beginning of this course, one of the examples was Abraham and even Jacob having a direct discourse with God, even arguing with God, even bargaining with God.
Yes,
And
yes.
the tradition of Psalm 22 is very much my God. you
Yes,
know,
yes,
and
yes.
Saying, what are you doing here?
Right,
We have a
right.
covenant.
Yeah, I thought we had a deal, boss. I thought we had a deal. What's this, right?
This
What,
is not-
what happened to the deal? Where'd that go? I've been a faithful servant. What happened to me, you know? It's true. And we hold, and it's interesting because after the Holocaust, there were Jews that actually, some did, but most actually didn't. But they talked about literally having a court and putting God on trial for having allowed the Holocaust to happen. But you can understand that that is something that is within our culture, our mindset. You would never, that concept is completely alien to Islam, which is based in submission, right? We're based in arguing, and we're based in negotiating, and we're based in partnership and struggle. It's a very different relationship, right? So that's, yeah. Okay, yeah.
So for Christians who believe in an afterlife, it makes sense, you know, if you suffer in this life, you'll be rewarded in the next life. And so that makes it feel okay to me and others, I'm sure. But for Jewish people who don't believe in an afterlife, and there are some, correct, who don't believe there's a
yeah,
heaven.
right.
So
Some.
how do they rationalize, why should I suffer?
It's very difficult. And the emphasis for those kinds of folks is on social justice. It's on repairing the world as it is. It's doing as much good as you can with what you have. You know, it's a very different emphasis than thinking about, I'm going to starve myself on Yom Kippur because that's going to get me some points, you know, later on in heaven. It's a very different idea. And in liberal Judaism, you see much more emphasis on what they call tikkun olam, repairing the world, doing good things now, because this is what we know we have. Heaven we might have. This we know we have. Here we know we can make an impact, so we're going to do these things now, right? So you see much more of that in this, but in Orthodoxy, it's much more about the world to come. What's called Olam Haba, the next world, right? So there's a beautiful, what was her name? Dara Horn wrote a book, The World to Come, and the world, I mean, it was a baby coming into this world. This is the world to come. It's a very interesting book. I got to meet her in Bend. It's wonderful, amazing talk she gave. So,
Yeah, I think so.
okay. If not, you get to come back next week. What?
There's some books back here.
Oh, Peggy brought books for you to look at. These are books about the Jewish roots of Christianity and basically some really wonderful, brilliant scholars' works that bring to us the Jewish elements that really infuse Christianity that you might not know if you don't know about Judaism very much. And in fact, one of them is the New Testament, I think, from a Jewish perspective or something like that.
There's two rabbis that they read Greek, they read Hebrew, they study the Talmud, they
Right.
Mishnah, everything, and so they take it from, if you can think of, let's say, the parable of the Good Samaritan, something like that. They look at it from a Jewish perspective.
Right.
So they go down line by line by line.
Right. Right, you have it, yeah, so that in so many things that the Christian understanding is that it's a radical concept, or it's a new thing, or Jesus brought something different. It's really a continuation of Jewish thought. It was always there, and there were always three camps. So you had a lot of ways you could go with it. You know, it's funny, we were in Bend and the hospitals came up with this new idea to have a prayer shawl, like for people that were terminally ill. A prayer shawl is a new idea. Thousands of years we've been doing that, right? So just, yeah. So, okay, any more or we're good? One more.
Okay, well, earlier you mentioned that Jews thinking way back to the beginning, in the beginning, God created. What's an overall feeling, or is it mixed much like Christians with abortion?
That's an entire, you got another 8 weeks, we can do that. But it's a very, the long and the short of it is, in Jewish law, the mother has more rights than the baby. The baby is a potential life, the mother is an actual life. That's in a very, very small nutshell. There's a lot of ramifications to that, whatever, but that's kind of a nutshell. I do want to mention one thing, and I'm sorry to have to mention it, but I do want to just say it, that I finally got to the bank the other day and I deposited the checks, some of them that you wrote to me, and one of them bounced. So I don't know which one. I don't know. But if it was, maybe check your account and make sure that you're okay with that. So I just want to say that that is out there hanging around. So we'll do another nigun, right?
Jewish
What?
abortion joke.
Jewish abortion joke? This is a joke? Okay.
So the tradition is that a Jewish fetus isn't viable until it graduates med school. Until it graduates med school.
Yes. Right, that's it. Let's just have a cleansing, like a little nigun. Let's do this is a little different. Thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you.